What's the biggest flaw you see staffing firms make in developing their sales teams?
A couple things. The first is, and this ties back to the overall strategy that they have. The front end. Once you align your value propositions to the different verticals that you're going to be selling into, have I aligned my sales talent and how to present and how to become memorable in front of those specific verticals? And the issues that I come across in my experience in staffing is one, the approach is a bit too transactional and it's not strategic enough. And we can talk more about what that means, but a lot of that is embedded in the way that we develop and the way that we train our salespeople. And then knowing the nuances. And here's where I do run into this quite a bit. There's a whole different way to sell into an existing customer versus how you sell into new business development, trying to get new logos. And most strategies go both ways, but you have to train on the nuances. They're polarizingly opposite approaches. All the same psychological, all the same biases, all the same behavioral psychology that's going on exists, but oftentimes it's reversed in how you approach an existing client versus how you approach trying to get a new logo in. And I don't believe, one, that we're aligning our sales teams and their talents to going after new business, and then how to approach an existing client to get add-on, to upsell, to get brand extensions, different, services involved.
How should we approach an existing customer?
Well, an existing customer, you have to leverage what's the biggest challenge is a new, and that's the status quo bias. So when you already have an existing client, they know exactly, they've invested in your company, so the onboarding's already been paid for. When I say status quo bias, they stay. Why? Because they've invested the time and the effort and the resources in bringing you on. Change is just very difficult for all of us. And so when you're selling into an existing client, that's where you start. So if you think about it this way, the biggest difference, I believe, for selling existing clients versus selling new clients is understanding loss aversion. In other words, human beings are 2 to 3 times more will protect a loss than they will to get a gain. So let's move that into the sales environment. And I don't believe that there's enough development around loss aversion because it's the quickest way to get to a yes or no. It's part of the whole closing process. Well, it's reversed. If I'm selling into an existing client, loss aversion to them is the loss of taking the risk to go with another supplier or to go with another vendor. And so I leverage that and I put evidence in front of them. There's just plenty of strategies to demonstrate why it's so important to stay where you are and avoid the risk. Now think about that in the context of getting a new logo. I have to overcome. So I have to now paint a picture. I have to contrast what that client stands to lose if they choose to do nothing. And then contrast that with the value that I bring, the value that my company brings to helping them develop and grow their own business. So it's the same bias, it's loss aversion.
Yeah.
The difference is selling it into an existing versus selling it into a new logo.
How do you then articulate that to a current customer? What do you propose people say on the phone? Or if you're sitting down with a current customer, how can you actually articulate that message to them?
Well, you have to go back to the beginning. So start to identify and pretty much verbalize, if it's a phone call, a testimonial, a case study of what the situation was like when you and I first met. What problems were they happening? You're taking them back to the pain so they can remember why they chose you in the first part. And then I would carry that forward with all the effort that was put in on both sides. In other words, how much time and effort they put in vetting us out, how many resources, how much money they spent in doing that, And then I would shift the conversation to the onboarding process. And then, probably lastly, I would put evidence. I'd have to put up evidence of how their business has improved, why it's in a better position today than it was when we first met.
Knowing that a lot of our clients, so on the staffing side of it, the clients that we're working with are working with multiple staffing firms. They're not exclusive to one staffing firm internally. How do you then have that loss aversion conversation internally, knowing that they're sort of already two timing us? They're sort of already working with another player.
Yeah, I didn't have as much of experience with that. I mean, I understand what you're talking about, but again, you go back to this is where, and you were talking about some of the differences around being transactional. You look at and I'm talking about the top 10, 15% of business development professionals, whether they're in the account manager position or in the sales position. They own that relationship. They have so much credibility with the client. They have so much trust in the
Yeah.
client that ultimately they put enough evidence, because their role is to teach and tailor their presentations to that client, put enough evidence in front of them and create and paint a picture of what the opportunity looks like to even take on more and what that would mean to them. I mean, think about it in your own business. Who likes having multiple vendors? I disagree with that thinking that I want to put two together or three together
Yeah.
to have them compete with each other. That doesn't match up with any science. That doesn't match up with any reality around loyalty, around commitment. I can do a lot more with you provided I continue to expand the current revenue stream.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. And I would agree, right? I don't want to work with multiple vendors in anything that I do. I want to find one person that can assist me in multiple ways and find the right vendor for the challenges that I have. Now, yes, certainly if there are things outside of vendor one's area of expertise, then yeah, you have to go find somebody
Agreed.
else to
Agreed.
support, right? You're not going to ask your plumber to work on your car, right? You go find somebody else to work on a different challenge. So I think that makes complete sense. And I'm sitting here trying to marinate on the thought of, well, how do we get more business from these current customers? And in understanding loss aversion and understanding what it's going to cost you to vet new staffing firms or vet a new process, you're almost playing on the offense while also playing on the defense, right? You're
Yes.
you're 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 trying to drive new business by saying, listen, here's what it would cost you to go a different route.